her insight with another wonderful group of ladies that work in the technology sector, but don't necessarily code, but they are involved heavily in different technologies and different aspects of things that you would never think of how you could get into technology. So we're going to be talking about a little bit about their background and their job roles. And I'm going to pass it over to Maggie. But before we do that, just a couple of features. We do have a chat window. So I always like to have everybody say, introduce themselves. Like, I'm Toanne from San Diego. And if you have any questions during the presentation, you're welcome to add a question or a comment, and we'll try to make sure we answer at the end of the presentation. And yeah, we're gonna get started here. So let me close that out and we'll get started. So I'm gonna screen share. I'm gonna pass it over to Maggie, and then Maggie's gonna introduce the panel that's speaking today.
Okay. And so I just want to go ahead and say we have lovely ladies from different areas of OIT. We have Jane and Kathy and Heather, and Jane's waving. And I'm going to give them an opportunity to talk about their background, because I think it's really helpful to hear how each one of us got into tech, and we're all from very different backgrounds and experiences. So I'm going to go ahead and go with the first slide.
Let me screen share.
The agenda, obviously, but we'll go ahead and go with OIT.
Can we see the screen
just to
okay?
kind of get you some familiarity. Can everyone see it okay? Yeah, we're good. So I'm going to have you skip to the next slide, Joanne. Sorry, next two slides.
Oh, next one.
One more? Yep, perfect. So OIT is Office of Information Technology for the state of Colorado. Basically, we're an agency that provides technology services to 17 different agencies, which include like public safety, Department of Revenue. Our agency basically supports them with any technology needs, or even offers solutions that they may require or ask for. I'm not really going to get too much into OIT, but just kind of want to give a very basic background. There's a link there that's attached to this presentation where if you want to learn more about OIT, or do decide to move to Colorado and want to work for OIT, they can give you more information on what we do and more of our background and our history. All right, so if you want to go next slide. Hold on, let me, oops, wrong one. It's mine, yeah. How do I make you smaller? Let's see.
You know what, you can.
Oh, there we go. Got it. Okay, so just to kind of give a background of me, again, my name is Maggie Constantino. I'm the vendor risk and relationship manager for OIT. Military spouse, 22 years. So sometimes it's easier to explain my background in correlation with the duty stations that we were stationed on. You guys probably are all very familiar with that. So I'm going to go ahead and start with San Diego. Again, it's just a background of who I am and my career progression for the most part. So again, in San Diego, I met my husband in San Diego in college. He was stationed on the USS Peleliu, the Nimitz, ACU-5, Camp Pendleton. We were there for many, many, many years. I wasn't really involved in too much in military life, except to maybe shop at the commissary or attend an ombudsman meeting every once in a while. I was kind of very much trying to make a name for myself at a brokerage house called LPL. I had two girls. My husband left on 8-month deployment a week after my youngest was born. I'm sure some of you guys can relate. Had no family in San Diego, but had a fantastic daycare lady who really supported me. My hours were traditionally from 4 in the morning to about 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I was on my way to making vice president of mutual fund trade reconciliations. Was being mentored by executive leadership, and I had a great team of fantastic guys who handled mutual fund trade reconciliations. So basically, in other words, if a mutual fund trade or transfer went bad, my team was responsible for fixing it on a time schedule. I remember on one Sunday morning, I received a call to prepare for a Monday morning trading event. I was in about 2:30 in the morning, the day Bear Stearns and the market crashed. So to continue on, 6 months later, husband casually states over the phone, "Our time in San Diego is over." Navy says we need to go overseas. We're not meant to stay in San Diego for so long, and they won't let me pick any more orders in San Diego. So I was pretty crushed. We were moving to Japan, and I cried when I told my boss. They gave me the best going away party and kept singing "Domo arigato, Mr. Roboto," until I begged my coworkers to stop. Let's see. So then transitioned, went to Sasebo, Japan. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Sasebo, but I know Toan is. It's a very small little area on the bottom of Kyushu Island in Japan. My first 2 out of 3 years had a horrible transition. My husband had shore duty, but could do little to help me with the transition. I was pretty miserable. I had a job through Bank of America, or otherwise known as Community Bank, for those that are familiar with BASE. The pay was horrible. The drama with the spouses was unbearable. And I decided on the term, if you're not earning, you're learning. So my last year there, I started focusing on obtaining my MBA and had Bank of America pay for it. And it's kind of funny how things work out. Because of my job at Community Bank, I got to know BASE leadership and leadership of various organizations, which helped me land my next job at Duty Station Yokosuka, Japan. So transition to Yokosuka, a bigger area in Japan. It's about an hour from Tokyo. So as soon as I got there, I was in the process of working my butt off for my MBA. I thought I would go after jobs at FFC or Fleet and Family Services, but soon realized how tough the competition was. My husband was stationed on the USS George Washington and was deployed quite a bit, so it was just me and my girls. One day, after multiple walks where the girls were in school, I saw that the USO was hiring for an operations manager. So I knew I knew one of the program managers from my time in Sasebo, so I called her and said I'd be applying for the center operations manager position. She encouraged me, and 4 months after my arrival to Yokosuka, I became the center operations manager for the largest USO center in the Pacific. It just opened, expectations were pretty high, and the USO Center had a prime real estate location right on the waterfront. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Yokosuka, but it's right across the street from the Blue Ridge. There were several base organizations, such as MWR, that did not agree with the USO being there. A lot of politics, obviously. So my first week on the job was pretty tough. But throughout my years working for the USO, I overcame all the obstacles that came across my path. I had 250 volunteers, 2 full-time staff, and we were a pretty unstoppable force. So unstoppable that even Ambassador Caroline Kennedy had heard of my operations, and I was invited to the US Embassy to brief her. So now I had my MBA from Colorado State, and that dreaded 3-year mark came, and I did not want to leave. And guess what, my husband says? We're moving back to Sasebo. So Sasebo, back to Sasebo. Husband had shore duty, had okay time transitioning, still was crying inside for leaving my wonderful job and friends. Everything okay? Oh, I didn't see that. I lost my thing there. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, good. All right, so okay. So moved back to Sasebo, was cried inside, missed my friends. There was a manager in Sasebo, so at first I did not work when I arrived. Interestingly enough, my reputation from Yokosuka had followed me. I was invited by the US Embassy to start up an intercultural program between the local Japanese community and the American population on base. Started up various programs and even was honored by the mayor of Sasebo. So yes, there's even horrible pictures of me in the local newspaper if you can read Japanese. However, I was still bored and a little lonely. I wanted more. So I found this little notice on Facebook inviting spouses to come to a coffee shop on base to learn coding. But I thought, why not? I came and met Joanne, and she encouraged me to learn. I think at first I learned a little bit of Java and was desperate to build my own website. So after struggling for a while, I did develop my website with her help. I took it a step further and started my own company called Vintage Sources, which through my website allows military spouses who love to shop off base at local thrift, antique, and others, but due to language barriers are afraid to venture out into a local community. My little website gave them directions to these shops in English. So skip forward today, I have over 1,500 followers from around the world, and it's all because of the little meeting that Joanne created in How to Code. Okay, so go back to Sasebo. USO came calling again as a past manager had transferred to another country. I was now responsible for 2 centers and was told I needed to revitalize its operations. So now I was working for the USO, the US Embassy, trying to figure out how to start up a company and learning to code all at the same time. And just for the heck of it, I applied at American University to obtain my master's in international relations. And I got accepted. I know, I'm pretty crazy. Then came the USS Fitzgerald. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the situation that happened there. I'm not really going to get into details, but it was a horrible time for the US Navy. I was called into action by the 7th Fleet Command leadership and USO executive leadership to lead USO global operations. So I flew into Yokosuka, spearheaded global operations and many other activities. Again, not going to get into details. You can read about the disaster. And if you get really, really bored, you can read about my contributions online. I received the highest award for leadership by the USO president and got some really cool coins. But my time in Japan was ending and my husband was tired. He was ready to retire. All right, so we go down to Colorado. So Colorado, we bought our house over the internet while in Japan. I know, pretty crazy again. Husband was still in Japan. He had to finish his tour. And my girls and I had never been to Colorado before. The day we flew in was the day we first came to Colorado. The first couple of months I was pretty lonely. Money was tight. I was really worried about my girls. It was a pretty hard adjustment. Reverse culture shock is a real thing. I also had all these experiences and wondered how the heck am I going to explain it on one little resume. I knew I wanted to work in tech because 1, I wanted to learn as much as I could to help my little company. And 2, I was fascinated by it. I just didn't know what I could do in tech. What jobs could I apply for? So I started looking. I found this one job called Vendor Relationship Manager for the state of Colorado. And I thought, I'm good at making friends. I could yell at vendors if I needed to. So I applied. As my boss says, my resume was nothing like the others I had applied. I think he stated about 100 people had applied for my position, but it was all because of my experiences that made him look at my resume twice. He said my resume was like telling a story. And so, I lost you there. Okay. So Kathy can tell you more. She took part in hiring me. Thank you, Kathy. And nevertheless, here I am. My role has changed a bit. I'm now the vendor risk and relationship manager. And I get to use my mom's voice to lecture all the big boys like Microsoft, Salesforce, AWS, Google. Right now, Motorola, when they don't comply with OIT's procedures and policies. Every day I learn more and more, and now fascinated by risk in international cybersecurity. I'm currently studying for the CompTIA Security Plus exam, and eventually will attain a CISM to get more involved. So the bottom line is, it doesn't matter what experiences you have had. The tech world can be a welcome career, as it's not limited to having a computer science degree or coding. I find I use my past experiences such as leadership skills, relationship management, project management, and overcoming language barriers. Have you ever tried to communicate with someone who talks about pen testing, firewalls, IP addresses, malware, SOC 2, Type 2s, and agile methodologies? It's like learning Japanese all over again. I further use my skills as well as working under pressure and mediation. So I wish you all the best of luck and hope you find a career path that makes you feel fulfilled and excited to wake up in the morning. Thanks for your time. And next you get to hear about Kathy.
Thanks, Maggie. I'm very happy that we hired you. And it's not just Maggie's mom's voice that she uses. We joke that it's like, release the Kraken, you know, when we need to unleash Maggie on a vendor who's not behaving. So as you can see by my slide, I am a military mom, not a military spouse, although my husband was in the Navy, but he hasn't been for years. So at any rate, I am the non-technical person in the technical group here. But let me back up a little bit before I get to that on my kind of early background and experience and so forth. I started out life in the business world on a manual typewriter, complete with typewriter eraser and carbon paper. The advent of that electric typewriter with a built-in correction ribbon, that was a huge thrill. And oh my God, whiteout was like the best thing ever. And I've worked in administration, business management, operations type positions in multitude of industries for many years. The mere fact that I learned how to type on a typewriter should tell you just about how many years. At any rate, one time I got a job because I was the only qualified applicant who wasn't afraid to learn how to use a computer. They had just gotten the first PC in the office and nobody wanted to touch it. And I'm like, something new and exciting, yay. So every software package I have learned over all these years, and most of them forgotten, I learned through on-the-job training, and that was marvelous. Have somebody else pay for your training, that's the best thing ever. So I've seen the business world kind of go from manual typewriters and snail mail to electric typewriters, and then word processors and fax machines, and then personal computers and email. And now you can do almost anything on the little smartphone in the palm of your hand, which is, you know, that's a huge stretch of change. My background or my education includes bachelor's degrees in both business management and accounting. And I also have a Lean Black Belt certification. I've taken the ITIL Foundations course, and I have some mediator training. But as far as my experience in the technical world goes, about 8 years ago, I took an administrative role in a technology department of a large organization. And Heather's going, oh yeah, because she and I work together there. And there I was exposed to way different types of technology and its language, things I had not encountered in smaller organizations that I had worked for in the past. Things like desk side and cloud and mainframe and security and architecture. Had never heard of those before because we had only been dealing with PCs. So that was a real eye-opener. A few years later, I moved on to work in state government in Colorado here at the Governor's Office of Information Technology, where I am now, where I work with Maggie and Heather and Jane. This added a whole new language and understanding as I kind of explored the difference between private sector and public sector, huge difference there. A whole lot of acronyms, which I know all of you military folks are very familiar with the acronyms. We have a whole second batch of them, so that's always fun. About 18 months ago, I moved from the business operations side of things into the vendor management space to become the vendor performance manager. And Maggie and I comprise a team of two, count them two. And working in that space has really been a crash course in understanding what our service owners and customers need versus what our vendors are offering, as well as understanding how to hold them accountable to the things that they're supposed to be doing. Their companies sign these long, complex contracts, and then they just kind of go off and sometimes do what they want to do. And Maggie and I have to kind of reel them back in and say, no, you need to do this for us because you said you would. So that's basically what our job is. So being a non-technical person, technical world, if I had to sit down in front of a computer and code to save my life, I'd be dead now. So I'm really impressed that you guys jump in here and learn this stuff on your own. I think that's so cool. And maybe one day I'll do that, but not this week. I'm kind of busy. So in being the non-technical person in the technical world, it's kind of like being a translator between the business side of things and the technical side. each side kind of tends to have their own language, and they're kind of siloed, and they don't really have a good understanding of what the other areas do and how it all fits into a bigger picture. And so that's kind of the role that I've played a little bit, kind of unofficially. It's not in my job description. But I've also been able to participate in some user experience testing, which kind of helps the technical side of things understand how what they've created works and looks for the end user. And then, of course, holding our technical vendors accountable to the contracts that their companies sign to make sure that they're providing the goods and services that that we want and we need for our agency customers and also for the citizens of the state. So all of that to say, I actually have some recommendations if you're looking to get into the technical world, or if you're kind of dipping your toes in and wanting to explore things. And I'm sure none of this is new to you. You guys probably all know this stuff, but I'm going to say it anyway. So there you go. Do your research, know what's out there as far as what organizations are, what they do, what they provide, who their competition is. What opportunities are out there, who's going to offer you that free training to get you a little farther along your path, and ask a lot of questions of lots of different types of people. So people in the technical world, of course, because it's so complex and broad. I mean, you could go into 1,000 different areas and still be considered tech. But also expand your knowledge about business in general and kind of understand what those different areas are, so that you can speak accounting or you can speak marketing, even if it's just enough to say hello. Also, explore government jobs at the local, state, and federal level. Nowhere do all the parts of technology come together better in one place than in the public sector. We kind of have a little bit of everything in government. And of course, keep up. Technology changes so fast. What you learn today probably is going to become obsolete while you're sleeping. Like I said, I've forgotten more software packages than I even know how many that I've learned and then stopped using and learned something new. So it just changes really fast. And when you're working in the technology space of an organization, definitely make those connections in the other departments that aren't tech related so that you have the broader perspective. And then finally, broaden your horizons. Be an avid lifelong learner, because no learning goes to waste. Those software packages that I've forgotten, they were useful for a time, and I learned something new each step of the way. So, so that's kind of where I am. And I will now turn it over to Heather, and she and Jane can definitely tell you more about the technical side of it all. Thanks, everyone.
So you think. Hi, I'm Heather. I am currently a resource manager for the service desk of the Office of Informational Technology with Colorado. I also do problem management, change management, major incident management, so I do a lot of these things. I do stuff, that's what I tell people, and I sleep rarely. I have 20 years of technology experience. I actually started in '99 when DSL started becoming available to residents for the first time. It was my first job out of high school, and I was a teenage mom and I needed a job. And I walked into a company and I said, I need you to hire me because I have a family to support at this point. And so I started learning technology. You know, I'm a zennial, is that what they call us? It's like between Generation X and millennials. So I grew up in Gen X, but I transitioned into being a millennial very fast. So I worked with the company for about 6 years, doing DSL support between a vendor and then our telephone companies, which was a very interesting experience because everything was so, sorry for the traffic. Everything was so competitive at that point. You know, the major telephone company, the little guy come in to hook up DSL because that was money they were taking away from the companies. So I not only started learning about technology, but I started learning about, you know, customer service, internal and externally, with the end users who were getting it, and then with the telephone company who were trying to basically buy lines for. So I did that for, you know, for a few years. an escalation manager where I would take on more technical issues until the company that I was working for, you know, did layoffs. If you're in technology, get used to a layoff. It's going to happen. It's going to happen multiple times. I thought I muted that. So my experience in these companies doing technology is you normally have about a 5-year lifespan in a technology company before layoffs happen anyways. And so I would just get used to, hold on.
Heather's usually pretty busy. She gets lots of calls.
You know, I'm like, who's calling me? I'm trying to hire a new employee right now. And so I have a lot of vendors calling me. Sorry about that. I thought I turned that off. So let's see, where was I? Oh yeah, my first job in technology. So I did get laid off with that job. And then I went to contract for actually a telephone company that we had been competing with to begin with before my layoff. And I started working there for a while, and then something happened at Quest, which is now CenturyLink. And in a lot of the states that CenturyLink supported, they understood there may have been some, you know, it was all over the news, embezzlement by the president of the company. So what they did is they laid off all the contractors. I walked into work and they said, here's your box, you gotta go. And I was like, well, oh crap, what am I gonna do? So I enrolled in school for network administration, and I got a part-time job doing bill collecting. So I was that girl, but it allowed me to work 32 hours a week. They gave me full-time benefits, and I was able to continue my education at night. So I was a mom, I had 2 kids, I was going to school full-time, and I was working part-time at a bill collection agency. And after I started getting to the point where I was getting ready to complete my college education, I remember going in and talking to the manager of that company, and he said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I've been going to school for network. This is where I want to be. And he said, and I will never forget this, he said to me, there's always one of you. And I decided at that point that maybe this wasn't the company that I wanted to continue my path on. Like Kathy, and you know, Maggie, they paid for a lot of it, you know, because I was going to school and I had been working there, and you know, education was one of those things that they put in there. So so they did pay for me to leave them, and I stayed at home with my kids for about a year and a half. It was the year that my youngest daughter, who is a veteran at this point, it was, she went to kindergarten, and I said, I need to be around big people and get a job. And I landed another job at a cable company, Time Warner Cable. And I started out there, and I started out like everybody else did, like on the phones doing basic troubleshooting. And I will tell you, troubleshooting with an end user who doesn't know how to program a remote is probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. And I have done some really hard things, but getting my grandma to mash the right buttons so her TV works was almost impossible. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it was a national division. So they came eventually, and at Time Warner, so I moved up pretty quick. I went from being an agent, I was made team lead, and then I was made a supervisor pretty quickly, I would say within about 2 years. And so I supervised about 22 agents on a consistent basis. And then, of course, with all technology, somebody came in one day and said, we're shutting down the national office. And I said, oh boy, what am I going to do now? The good thing about that was I did get a really nice package. And since I was like a couple months from being vested, they had another location in Colorado Springs where I would commute from Thornton, Colorado to Colorado Springs every day. And for those who don't know Colorado, it's about an hour and 45-minute drive there and an hour and 45-minute drive back. And I made that commute for 9 months just so I could be vested and, you know, continue on with my career path as much as possible. I didn't have any desire to move to Colorado Springs, but I knew that, you know, I needed to get my retirement fund taken care of before I found another job. So it did work out to where I did put in my notice. And because of my package and the savings that we did have, I was able to spend the summer with my daughters. And as soon as they were ready to go back to school, it was the weirdest thing that ever happened. I woke up one day and said, I need a job. And so I applied online, and a contract company called me back that day and said, hey, you're not really qualified for this position, but we're going to have you interview for it anyways. And I said, okay, well, whatever. So I went to where Kathy used to work, CHI, which was interesting. I interviewed with their ITSM manager, the IT service management manager. And I actually walked out of there and I thought to myself, like, they'd be so stupid to hire me because I'm coming from troubleshooting cable boxes and they're talking about change management, problem management, major incident I have no clue what this man was talking about. And, but I knew the remedy ticketing system and I knew the outage website that they use to post their outages because that's something that I had worked with before. And on my way home, they called me and said, can you start tomorrow? And I was like, sure, you know, like, I don't really think you're very smart. I didn't think I was the best person for the job because I had absolutely no experience. So that's where I started my ITSM career. And that was, that was so long ago, nine years ago. And so I went in and I started learning. I started learning about major incident management, outage reporting, problem management, you know, root cause analysis, change management, you know, coordinating the changes that you're going to be making so you don't make that impact to the users that they're not expecting. And I started taking ITEL classes. You know, I've taken, you know, HDMI, ITEL. I'm on ITEL version 4. I just finished taking those courses. As soon as I'm finished with this call, I'm going to take my Scrum Master's test. And so I'm, you know, I continuously learn all these new processes. And I actually found that I'm not the most technical person, but I love, and this is so weird, IT processes. I love the process. I like there's rules and you follow the rules. And I can come back to you and say, you didn't follow the rules. And because of this, this is how you impacted our users. I work a lot with application developers. I work a lot with the infrastructure team. Desk side support is what we call them here. And I think it's kind of funny, you know, because I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about half the time. And I don't think you ever want me to, you know, fix your computer or anything. But I find that network administration that I so wanted to get into was actually social networking. And that is where I was able to fit into the IT community because I am a networking person. The first time I found out we had a vendor manager, I walked over to her office and I introduced myself and said, hi, Maggie, I heard you're our new vendor manager. We're going to be talking a lot. And we do. And most recently, I was moved into the service desk manager role. Unfortunately, they didn't have anybody to take on some of the processes that I was managing anyways. And so that is why I say I do major incident management. I do change management still. I do problem management still. And now I have a staff of 7 people that report to me that do IT service desk support for our agencies across the state of Colorado. So, you know, it's a lot. It keeps me busy. I agree. Keep learning. You know, reach out, connect to people. I probably get more things done in the IT community by having a conversation with somebody and introducing myself with somebody than I would, you know, being that network administrator that I wanted to be. Because I was like, oh yeah, I don't like people, which obviously I like people a lot. So, you know, you don't necessarily have to be technical to be in IT. If you have both those skills, wow, I like worship you at your feet because it is hard to do. But that's my background and my experience.
Thanks, Heather. I think we're moving on to Jane. Is that right?
Yes. Hi, can you hear me all? Okay, great. Good morning, at least in Colorado. Hope you all are well. I only have a little bit of military association. My dad was in the Navy, but that was long before I was born, because I'm old, and it was during the 50s when everybody went into ROTC during college, and then they served. But I'm very proud of him for that service. I think the unique thing there is that he apparently slept through a typhoon on board ship. He had amazing ability that way. But my background, I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up north in Kansas City. I went to college in Colorado, got a BA in international affairs, but promptly didn't know what I was going to do. It's basically kind of a liberal arts degree, a lot of politics and economics and history. And so I went to law school. Wow. That was a crazy ride. I don't recommend it to anybody, but anybody that might already be a lawyer, hey, go for it. Awesome. I see there's another Missourian, although you know I'm a Royals fan, so not a Cardinals. Anyway, I put a picture up here that represents my career path because I think it's actually been very windy. Kind of in a nutshell, for lots of years, I've done everything from it's always been public sector. It's always been for agencies, discrimination investigations. I was in-house at the court and did employment law. When I was quite young, at 27, I had judges sitting in my office asking me for advice. And I was like, I don't know, because, you know, they were the judges, but when it came to in-house employment matters, they were coming to me. So I had to learn very young, it's all about the bluff. You have to learn just to kind of roll with it and be able to say sometimes, you know, I don't know, I'll look into that and I'll get back to you. So I did that for quite a while. I also worked at several universities, and that's kind of where I got my diversity from employment. I went in and I did a lot of research contracts for KU Med Center, and I learned all about the pharmaceutical industry and clinical trials, and that was actually very interesting. So, you know, I had to deal a lot with big companies, mainly lawyers who talked over me from the East Coast when I was speaking. And most people think I'm from the East Coast, so they're shocked that people could talk over me. But no, in fact, they just talked on and wouldn't listen. I had, you know, that experience with both men and women. So I really didn't enjoy that. But while I was doing that, I started getting into a lot of compliance work because a lot of these contracts had a lot of compliance things, especially a lot of HIPAA. I've been around long enough where I remember when HIPAA and FMLA came in and how those, you know, hit our work in our society and what they meant. And then I had to read them. The thing I learned, and you don't have to be a lawyer for this, is that you can go out and read the regulations from agencies. You can read the laws, but the laws don't usually say a whole lot. It's the regulations and the implementation of them. Anybody can go out and read those. Those are all on the GAO website from the government. And if you have any interest in with your coding or with other things, you need to know, you know, what kind of regulation is around it. So that would be one of the tips I give you is a lot of times, you know, we work with folks at OIT because I've gone through my things. I was a compliance lawyer at an attorney at a university, which involved a lot of privacy work. I did information privacy. And now basically I do information security, where I'm in the security risk and compliance unit. So my legal background helped me a lot in that I'm really used to reading administrative regulations. And we always think, oh, that's just a lot of words. And most of the time, you know, it really is. But if you've ever had a chance to read through HIPAA, you'll notice that it talks all about information privacy. It talks all about information security. And it doesn't talk about the technical aspect, which is good for me because even though I love tech and I love to have my toys, I didn't train in technology. So everything I've learned, I've picked up on the fly from these various jobs and working with a lot of folks. I've often worked with CISOs at universities. So I learned a lot just basically almost by osmosis. You know, I used to kid in college that, well, you know, if I just sleep on my book, I'll get the information. That didn't quite work, but you can learn a lot from the people that you work with and by asking questions. And I'm such a nerd. I go out and read all these articles. I get onto Bright Talk, which has all kinds of free seminars all the time. And when I say free, of course, it's vendors trying to sell you products, but they talk to you about their products. So then you get to know a little bit about what these products do. So I still do that today. But going back, you know, I've done a lot with reading the regulations. So on the team, I really am kind of the policy wonk, right? So I can give advice on what kind of policies we should have in place. When people talk about NIST, NIST is another great place to go. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the National Institutes of Standards and Tech, but they have all of these wonderful publications, which are really boring to read, but they have lots of great information about every kind of computer tech that you need. Our office follows what is known as NIST Special Publication SP 800-53. And it's basically the federal government, US federal government standard that most agencies follow when they have to be what is called FISMA compliant, which is basically Federal Information Systems Management, okay? So if you ever do anything, either as a government job, if you're interested, or if you ever have to work for a company or a university or whatever it is you might do, a lot of times, obviously, they're guided by regulations. So it all goes back to this. And the NIST regulations really lay it out, you know, and they give you every part. If you want to learn about encryption, you can read the publication on encryption. If you want to learn about, you know, mobile devices, they've got stuff on mobile devices. It's all there for everybody, and it's all free. It's a matter of reading, trying to absorb it, and maybe dealing with some of the boring kind of, you know, policy style language. But it's a really good place to learn. One of the folks today, you know, talked about, you know, talking to your coworkers and whatnot, but I find that, you know, just reading and if you can get involved in more organizations, that is a great place to learn. So one of the organizations I'm involved in and have been since way back is called the IAPP, which is the International Association of Privacy Professionals. For a government employee, it's only $100 a year, which, not that $100 is small, but that's really a light fee. And I think they probably do something for military as well. I know they do stuff for students. Lots of these different organizations will offer you reduced, or, you know, you can even get sometimes scholarships to get into the organization. I encourage everybody just to reach out and ask. I'm also in an ethics organization, which is ethics and compliance. And I said, hey, I'm a state employee. It's really expensive for me to spend all this money. And they said, okay, well, here, half off once, you know, if you ask, sometimes you get. And once you're in these orgs, they have message boards, they have all kinds of networking. It's a great place to do, you know, all that networking and find out about other careers you might be interested in. And kind of like Heather said, you know, sometimes you just slide in sideways. You're doing one thing and pretty soon they think you can do more. I got hired for this job 3 years ago because I had so much information privacy background, but I didn't know half of what I needed to know. So once I got to this job, I said, well, how do all our units get together? How do they work? What do they do? And I've continued to ask that so that I can have a big picture. It's been very helpful to me to have done contracts in the past, because with compliance, that's a lot of contracts. So I can go in and say, okay, this is what the vendor is supposed to be doing. And also, hey, did we remember to ask the vendor that they have to be compliant with basically like IRS standards, because we do IRS data dumps that come down from the federal government. If it's in the contract, then we can hold them to the fire a little bit more. What you find with a lot of vendors, as similarly known, if they're a very large company, the very large corporate group does the contracts, and maybe not, they tell the groups that are performing the work for us. With a very small company, they usually don't read the contracts. They just sign on the dotted line because they're trying to get going. Be cautious of that. Be cautious if you're going out and offering your services to folks if there's stuff in a contract. You don't have to be a lawyer to read a contract and ask questions. The contract is really just supposed to be the story. So it's supposed to tell a story if there's ever a dispute later that the judge can say, okay, I see this contract, it's a story. And it's supposed to be telling the story for you as a vendor and for you as the contracting entity. So, you know, it talks about dollars, it talks about what kind of work I'm supposed to perform, and it talks about compliance. So these are all things that were really helpful to me. Again, you don't have to be a lawyer to do contracts. A lot of times I've come across a lot of people who, I had a friend in Kansas City who did a lot of remote contracting, like to do cell towers. She wasn't a lawyer. She was just a good talker and she could negotiate. She'd maybe taken a class on mediation and how to get there. She knew what the company would allow. So that's another avenue for people in tech. There's a lot of companies too that have gone completely virtual in tech, which is awesome, right? I know GitLab, if you're familiar, as a coder, you might be, they're a completely virtual company. So, you know, apply to them. They're out of Boulder, but I don't think they have anybody in-house. So those are the kind of things that I do. I'm a big proponent of reading, ingesting, asking people for help, networking through LinkedIn, joining free groups when I can find them, meetups, whatever they may be, because they're all over. And nowadays everything's virtual because everybody's staying at home with coronavirus. So there is a lot of opportunity out there. Just for anyone here or in the future who might watch this, I'm more than happy to visit with you if you ever have questions about how compliance works. You know, a lot of times it's just assessing, you know, again, have we in-house followed the rules? Have we serviced our customers? And I can help them, you know, balance that risk because the risk never goes away. So I don't want to overtake my piece. You know, I think there's some resources on the next page. If you could move the slide, please. We threw down some resources. I started, I know Maggie offered some. There are a million of them. But these are some of the ones that could think of off of it. If you're not familiar as a coder with OWASP, you should be. They have a lot of the standards that, you know, the best coders do. You know, do you understand the other parts of the business if you're coding that will be affected, so that you know how to insert security, which has to be done at the front end, not the back end, and bolted on. These are very, you know, options to do. SANS does a lot of training. They're crazy expensive, but you know, they do have great training, and sometimes they have free training. So look for them. Again, a lot of the stuff's vendor supported, but that's how you get a lot of knowledge. And, you know, it also gives you an opportunity to meet the people that are talking, and maybe there's a job there. So I encourage everybody to, you know, be a little bit brash and, you know, don't be afraid to reach out. I know I would be happy, and am always happy to help anyone, especially women who are looking for a leg up or to find out about some of these things. Other things to look into for jobs, universities often like remote people because they don't have space to actually keep them on campus. So I encourage you to look that way as well. You know, and I've got a friend who lives in Washington State, but she works for Arizona State. So, you know, there is not a limit to what you can do. That's probably the end of my time. Do folks have questions?
Let's check the chat window and see what's going on here. Do you guys feel comfortable if I share the presentation slides with our group after? Is that all right? Because I can, okay.
That's fine.
Great, thank you. Don't know if
I took a
And if anybody
screenshot,
wants an email and wants to follow up too, we can get those to you. Because I'm happy to give you other ideas on resources and organizations and learning if you're interested.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, I'm definitely interested in that. We're hitting a point of transition, but working remotely is the perfect scenario for all of this. I know we're here in this location for a little less than a year. Last kid just graduated college, and compliance and rules and regs in the Navy spouse world. I am known for being able to find stuff in the JFTR and bring truth to light. And so being able to do that and help out another population group, not a spouse, not necessarily Navy, you know, that kind of thing, that's my personal catnip. Looking forward to doing that in the future for somebody somewhere, somehow. And I love tech on the side too. But I'm not like Tao and Carly who are like, OMG, we got the umpty squats and the middly frats. Okay, I got some stuff. HTML, CSS can make it happen. Also can tell a good story. But looking for something like that in the future. And I love these ideas about looking at other places in universities. Compliance, hadn't even thought about that as a potential for a job later on. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah, compliance is huge in lots of organizations. And I will tell you, if you have any interest in information privacy, that is global. And that is one of the hottest areas going, and companies pay well over 6 figures for folks.
As an ombudsman trainer, I'm a certified ombudsman trainer, as volunteer for a Navy Region Southwest, and we talk about PII and compliance all the time. And so always walking that road and that path and keeping the center of the ethical standard. And that's tough.
Yeah, it is tough, and understanding the scenario around it. Got a really good article I could offer. I just saw it yesterday. My friend who's the CISO at UC San Diego, and he's also the privacy officer, and he wrote it in Salon. His name is Mike Korn, and it I can get it, and then it can be, I'll share it to Maggie and she can spread it around. It was a great article about privacy and today's world and surveillance. And, you know, right now everything is surveillance with COVID. And we don't think of that as surveillance, but it is. And it could be used in a bad way, but it could also be, you know, obviously used for good. So great areas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a couple of questions. Is it okay to reach out to you via LinkedIn? If it is, please drop it in the chat window if you have time, or if not, we can always link it later. Okay. And Chelsea is looking to work with a mentor to bounce ideas off. Is anyone open to that?
Yeah, that's fine. I'm not sure if her an area that she's looking at. We're all from different areas.
Mm-hmm. So maybe if you put, maybe after we'll have, we'll do your LinkedIn and then she'll reach out to you directly depending on the area that she's interested in.
No problem.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, emails that we want to share?
I put my email in the chat, and yeah, you can find us on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
I think Joanne and I can share our emails if anybody likes to reach out directly to us as well. I can
yes.
Oh, wait, Jane already did. Oh, okay, perfect. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay.
So we could do that after. But thank you so much for speaking to our group today about the different areas in tech. Because I think usually when people think of tech, they're like, I just have to code and be a software engineer. And that's the only option that you could do. And that's not true because there's so many different avenues. And maybe you already have training in a specific area, but you just need to transfer it over to a specific area in the tech sector. So this is very helpful and things that you would never think of. That might be your wheelhouse already. And why learn a new thing if you don't have to?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's really great that everybody's from different backgrounds, and military spouse, again, it really helps to see that.
Mm-hmm. And it's always like, it's funny because like Maggie and I met in Sasebo, Japan, and it starts like with you meet one person years later, and then stuff like this happens, and it's always it's good to network. It's good to know people. And that's part of the point of this, that you come from different backgrounds and you never know where it will lead you.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody have anything else they want to add or share?
We'd love to hear about your backgrounds if you want to share.
Does anybody want to share?
You can email it.
Well, I'm from all over the place. My dad was in sales. He was a sales exec. So I moved around a lot as a kid, but everybody's like, oh, was your dad military? I was like, no, he's just a sales guy. And so, but he was good at what he did. So they moved him and say, hey, we need you to improve sales here. So I grew up in Chicago, then moved to St. Louis. So I grew up in Missouri, graduated high school from there, and I went to University of Missouri. So there's my Mizzou diploma back there. So you can see the columns up there at Mizzou. Yes, I was a Cardinals fan.
So if I say rock chalk, you won't be offended.
we do have a I think we took that saying at Mizzou and we did something else to it. So we have,
Yes.
it wouldn't be appropriate for me to say in a Zoom meeting. But you know, we're technically not rivals anymore, but I think the rivalry will always be there.
Yeah.
But it's fun. I have friends who went to KU. I was accepted to KU too, but it was really far away from where I was. So I just I went midway. But yeah, so I have a degree in communications from Mizzou, and I worked in television news. I was a technical director. And I wound up meeting my husband, who was active duty, and moved to Fort Bragg. And it was, you know, it was a perfect time to do it because I was kind of bored in my job. But then I couldn't find a job. And so I went unemployed because I was overqualified they're like, oh, you've got a degree. We can't hire you. You're just going to leave us. I was like, but I need to make money. Nobody wanted to hire me. So I wound up as a temp, you know, for $10 an hour. I was like, this is so sad. I'm making $10 an hour working temporary, you know, as a temp, and I could lose my job at any time. So I had 3 jobs at one point, and I went without health insurance. And that was hard. It was very, very hard. And then, my husband and I got married, and I'm on work. We arrived back in Miami from our honeymoon, and I had a phone call saying, hey, I got a job in Raleigh at a TV station there. So I worked for Time Warner Cable for a couple of years. It was a 24-hour news channel. And my job has always been tech-based, you know, working with equipment and needing to know what that equipment did and how to get it to work on the air in real time, troubleshoot, get it fixed because it's affecting your broadcast. So it was very, you know, a very on-demand position, not having to know the equipment. But when I got pregnant, I ended up, you know, stopping work because I worked in Raleigh, but we lived in Fayetteville. So I had commuted an hour and a half each way. So it was 160 miles a day, and I did that for 2 years. I put a lot of miles in my car. Doing that while pregnant was very difficult because I was very nauseous and driving, and it was not fun. But I gave up that job for my family. My husband was deploying, and my job made enough to pay for daycare, but I was also third shift because I worked morning shows, and I had to be up at 4 a.m. And it just, so many different things. I was like, it's not worth it to put my body through that and have somebody else raise my child, because closest family was 1,200 miles away, and I had no friends in the area because I was always working. So I gave that up, and I raised my kids. And just, you know, being out of tech, you know, or that field I was out of that field for 5 years. I was so far behind, you know, it's a completely different field by the time I went back, or I thought about going back. So I didn't, just because I would have to commute again from where we were. And I was like, that's just too much time. It took too much time out of my day and just wasn't worth it mentally and physically. So I worked in retail. I went back to retail. I previously worked for Disney. So I had a lot of very top-notch customer service training. And I wound up working with vendors and developing excellent relationships and managing people, which I had already done. And then we moved again. And because I was a manager, and then they wanted me to run everything. And, you know, we moved because my husband's career was priority. And I was tired. Once we moved, I was just tired of giving up everything again and again. So my husband left a book out, and he was trying to get the kids involved in coding, because he's in cybersecurity. He's got an associate's, he's got a bachelor's, and he's got a master's, and he spent 20 years active duty, and he retired. And he left a book out, and he was going to teach the kids to code iPhone apps, and they didn't care. You know, he's like somebody, the book's just sitting there. He's like, oh, whatever. One night, they did it one night, and that was it. The next night, he's like, nah, I don't want to. So we weren't even in our house yet. We were living in this old, it was old Air Force barracks in Rome, New York. It was like middle of nowhere. Single room. I think we had 2 rooms, a living room and a bedroom, this tiny little kitchenette. And we lived in there for 2 months, and we had nothing to do. So I looked at the book. I was like, okay, this is awesome. And then I couldn't put the book down. I was like, oh, this is just like TV. Oh, I get this. I can do that. That's easy. I understand that. Where has this been all my life? Oh my gosh. So I spent 2 weeks nonstop developing an iPhone app from scratch, never having any experience. And I had it done, and I understood it. And I was like, where has this been all my life? oh my God, why didn't somebody tell me about this sooner? And it's funny because I've always been at the edge of that field. In college at Mizzou, I taught myself to, I designed a website because I was a gamer. I liked to play computer games, and my guild needed a website. And I'm on it, guys. I taught myself HTML. I learned basic A in high school, but it didn't occur to me that I could actually make a career out of that. I thought it was just fun. Nobody did it for real, right? It was fun to play with. So in New York, I'm like, can I do more of this? I want to learn more. My husband's like, yes, do more, because coders make good money, Carly. I need you to make good money. He's like, I want this. I need you to make more money. I'm like, okay, that'd be better than $10 an hour as a temp. Absolutely. So I started a Python course and I loved it. And I was that really eager older student, all the students, and they were half my age. I'm like definitely old enough to be their mothers. But I'm in there raising my hands, asking questions. I'm like, is this right? Is this right? I couldn't get enough. And I just graduated with my associates, which is awesome. So I have, my associate's degree in computer programming, actively looking for work. However, with my husband's job, my kids are active, they're, athletic. And then we've got this whole learn from home thing going on. Are they going back to school? Are they not going to go back to school? So if I get a job, it has to be right here in my little office at my computer. I've got computer screens galore. I will do what I have to do to make sure I can work and make a difference. But I've got to do it at home. That's how it has to be. So I've applied to Georgia Tech, and my application is in. They've got a great online master's degree program. I'm going to go for computer science. We'll see if they get me, if they let me in. But it's very, very affordable, extremely affordable. Actually, it's the same tuition's the same price that I paid at community college, which is $150 a credit hour for a master's degree from Georgia Tech. Yeah. So military spouses can take advantage of that. So there's a bunch of us who applied. So that's where I'm at. I'm trying to study everything. I've got books galore. I'm old school. And yes, I like to read stuff online, but I